Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something that seems to confuse a lot of people. They seem to struggle with this idea, and that's this idea that when we say something is a really valuable training tool, that in their minds that means it's the only thing you should ever do, right? And that's really a problem. And I can give you guys a lot of examples because in actuality, they often conflict with each other. Uh, Easy example, I will say things like stretch position movements or movements that allow us to get a stretch reflex or a myotatic reflex are very, very valuable for hypertrophy. Very valuable for hypertrophy. And in some cases, they even have direct movement pattern carryover to our strength. Not always. Now, and I don't mean just due to the hypertrophy, because we know a bigger muscle has more strength potential, but in some cases, if that stretch reflex, that mechanical tension addresses a weak part of a movement pattern for us, you'll get some additional strength carryover, right? I will say things like dead stop movements, right? Movements where we come to a full stop and a pause can be useful for hypertrophy. In some cases, again, it forces us to develop certain parts of a muscle more, right? Pause benching, floor presses, things like that. They very frequently are great for strength because we have to learn to oftentimes explode from a stop. Higher rate of force production. Right? This becomes really valuable. So then we say that, and then people say, well, aha, so every movement we do needs to be from a dead stop. All right, do you see the problem there? I just named two tools that are extremely useful tools. Okay? Stretch reflex exercises and dead stop exercises. I just said they're both very, very good tools. They're both tools that I program, I endorse, I use. But you can't do both together. Right? So if we tried to make everything that we do fall into those categories, we wouldn't have any exercises left. You know how few exercises exist that allow you to get both a stretch reflex and hit a dead stop? Some people would argue box squats. I do not agree. I think one of the merits of the box squat is that it removes, to a large degree, the stretch reflex. It breaks up the eccentric concentric chain and forces us to have a higher rate of force production from a dead stop instead of using a stretch reflex to do it. Right? These two tools contradict each other for the most part. How can they both be amazing? Because they're different tools. You can't make everything fit into both of them. In fact, you'd have almost no exercises that fit into both. And it's not necessary for every exercise that you do to fall into either category. Just because something's a good tool doesn't mean it's the only thing you should use. I'd argue that dumbbells are an amazing tool for hypertrophy, particularly for upper body. Does it mean that everything we do should be with a dumbbell? Of course not. We could do a lot of stuff with the dumbbells, though, and it would benefit us greatly. All right, let's talk about the basic concepts of conjugate. And these are essential concepts. What are our three main training modalities if we set aside GPP that we use in conjugate? We do max effort work, we do dynamic effort work, and we do repetition effort work. In short, we train up to heavy training maxes or 1 rep max lifts, right? Best way to maximize your strength. Has nothing to do with your strength potential, though, and that's what people forget. All that other stuff builds your strength potential. Max effort work helps us maximize and directly apply the strength potential that we've built with the rest of our training. It's the best tool for bringing out 1 rep max strength, which is strength is the same thing. Strength is measured in 1 rep maxes. Hopefully people understand that and why that's measured that way. I'm not going to get into the nuances of that. So if you were to listen to me say that, people say, oh, so should everything we do be a 1 rep max? No. It counts for about 5% of our training on this system. It's a mandatory part of it. about speed work. We say dynamic effort work has a whole host of benefits. It's amazing. It really shouldn't be optional. It's an amazing tool for teaching us speed strength, teaching us to repeatedly get tight quickly, to set up quickly. Has its own hypertrophy benefits. Gets a lot of practice in on first reps. But again, it teaches us how to push or pull with maximum force. So then when we say that, people say, oh, so should everything should be done with speed work, or at least with compensatory acceleration. No. In fact, we can't do everything as speed work. If we did, we can't use the max effort work. Because if it's moving too fast, it's not a max. They contradict each other. Does it make either one less of a tool? No. Our speed work makes up maybe approximately about 25% of our weekly training on this training system, conjugate. And what are we left with? Repetition effort. You guys would think of it as hypertrophy work, or some people would call it bodybuilding work. I don't think of it as bodybuilding work because that's a competitive endeavor. All right? It's not teaching you how to pose or put on fake tan or get your panties all put on correctly, so it's not bodybuilding. So I don't think that's the correct use of the term. It's hypertrophy work. Well, hypertrophy work is amazing. We should be doing a lot of 10s and 12s and things like that, particularly on exercises that we can get a longer range of motion on than our classic lifts. Extremely useful. Does it mean everything we do should be that way? No, of course not. We'll never maximize performance. We'll sure raise our strength ceiling, though, by getting jacked. But do you see the problem here? As soon as you start saying, because something is a very, very good tool, or even a great tool, doesn't mean that we apply it to everything that we do. Because if you come back over and look at that, I gave you 3 basic training modalities that we use every week. We use all 3 of them in this system. So obviously we can't make everything we do fit them. Same thing when I mentioned stretch reflex versus dead stop movements. I think it would behoove most of us to make most of our exercises fall into one of those 2 categories. But is it necessary for everything to fall into one of those 2 categories? I mean, if we have something else that's also a good tool, and it doesn't fit one of those 2 categories, are we just going to not use it just because there are benefits to those? Well, what if that tool really brings something to the table we're not getting? How about a lateral raise? Like, let's say our side delts are really lagging. That exercise doesn't fall into either category. Does it mean it's not a great delt exercise? It's time proven. We don't just not do it because it doesn't fit into one of those categories. We can address the merits of any given training tool without saying that anything that's different is useless or can't be potentially great as well. You cannot get caught up in that mindset. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.